Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I've got 3 English movies which are about alien invasions. They're all from the 1960s. They're all made on relatively small budgets. And they're all a bit of fun. Now one of them I've mentioned before on the channel. But this time I'm going into a little bit more of a deeper dive on it. So let's get started. This first one was a gift from a subscriber, Portland182. And it is from 1965, starring Edward Judd. Invasion. And this is a nice little package of this movie because it's dead skinny and it'll fit onto the shelves a lot easier. So let's have a look at the credits. Edward Judd, Yoko Tani playing an alien, Valerie Guerin playing a female doctor, Lyndon Brooke, Eric Young, Cy Chin turns up as well, who has been in any number of things, including Lucky Grandma recently. Directed by Alan Bridges, this one's a kooky, very small budget science fiction movie. So I'll read the blurb off the back because it's concise. Routine tests on a traffic accident victim lead to shocking discoveries when the man's blood is found to be unidentifiable and x-rays reveal a disc embedded in his brain. His fabulous tale of being an escaped prisoner from an alien spaceship takes a turn for the sinister when the hospital staff realise that they're under a state of siege. So this one's an alien invasion movie on a very small scale. In fact, all 3 of these are alien invasion movies on very small scales. The interesting thing is that all of the aliens are Asian in appearance, and they wear motorcycle helmets, latex jumpsuits, and plastic go-go boots, which gives them a kind of vibe like a Japanese tokusatsu movie in the 1960s, but it works. It starts with a middle-aged guy with a girlfriend he's not supposed to be with, slightly drunk, driving down a country road at night in his car when he hits somebody and takes them to the local hospital. And he's dressed really oddly. The doctor on call at the emergency room is Edward Judd's character, and he plays the doctor really well. He's tired, he's frustrated by the lack of resources, he's overworked. You can tell he's like a proper ER doctor. Overworked, they've seen everything and done everything. But then something comes along which he's not familiar. His nurse is played by Cy Chin, which is a nice bit of multicultural acting. It takes a slightly odd turn later on when the nurse is knocked out and her place is taken by one of the aliens. And nobody notices because she's a short East Asian looking nurse, which shows that kind of cultural obliviousness that many people have experienced who are of non-Anglo appearance. The male patient touches a nurse on the arm and then is able to speak English and starts communicating and telling his story. He says he's a soldier transporting 2 prisoners from another planet to a third planet, but they accidentally stop by on Earth. Things escalate when the aliens, while looking for this man, there are actually 2 female aliens looking for him, put a force field around the hospital while they're trying to find where this guy's located, and that force field creates a warmer environment. These aliens are from a hotter planet than ours. There are some really good scenes in this one. There's a scene where one of the doctors tries to escape and his car hits an invisible force field, and it's shot really well on the low budget. The editing makes it work. And one of the other things they do to add to the verisimilitude is an old Howard Hawks trick, where there's a lot of overlapping dialogue in some of the scenes in this one, and people are talking over each other as they kind of figure out what's going on, and that gives it a realistic feel. It's a little hard to follow for some people, but overlapping dialogue is what we all do, and sometimes we don't realize it. And having that in the movie kind of cuts down on runtime, which obviously saves money, but it also gives the film a groundedness from quite an absurd concept. And the female doctor, played by Valerie Guerin, is really great. She's treated as a professional. She's as tired and frustrated and overworked as Edward Judd's doctor is, and they kind of play off each other really nicely. There's not any kind of a romantic angle to it, which is a blessed relief, because not every stressful situation should lead to romance, and movies are a little bit unrealistic when they do that too often. But they work together, they try to find out what's happening. Now, this one was made by Merton Park Studios. It's a very small studio, didn't last terribly long. But the people making it did some interesting things. There were very limited sets for the hospitals. So you see a lot of times the characters in frames in the hospital. So you've got like a door here and a closet or something like that there, and the action is filmed in the bit in the center towards the, fairly far away from the camera, which gives you a sense that the hospital is bigger than it is. There are also some soldiers involved, including a character played by Barry Ingram, who is the kind of guy in charge of the soldiers. And again, when the soldiers are checking their radar and seeing odd things in their radar, they're in a little radar van, so you've got a very enclosed set there. So that part works well. And the imagination with which the movie is filmed to give us this kind of weirdness about the aliens. The alien spaceships are kind of off camera for the most part, but when we see them, there's just enough stock footage of rockets going up to give us a sense that these guys are escaping in a rocket or coming down to Earth in a rocket, depending on which part of the movie it is. So it works well, and Edward Judd's good in this one too. He was good at playing kind of frustrated characters, though, in movies like First Men in the Moon. He plays it a lot lighter, but there are a number of roles where he plays kind of cranky. But in this case, that crankiness lets him deep dive into the character much more than, say, an actor who was trying to be a star would do it with. Somebody who was angling for attention of the camera wouldn't have worked in this. You needed somebody who played well off the other actors, and Judd does, particularly with Valerie Guerin's doctor, and with the nurse, and with a few other people. You can see that kind of background in theatre that a lot of the English actors had, where they play interactively really well with the other actors. But Invasion, small budget, black and white film. In fact, all of the movies I'm going to talk about today are black and white, because making colour films was prohibitively expensive for small studios like Merton Park. But I like this one for a number of reasons. First off, having the aliens who are humanoid not being Caucasian and not being kind of Michael Rennie, for instance, makes it work. And of course it does give jobs to actors who are East Asian. Invasion is one that hasn't been around much here in Australia, but in England, according to my resources, thrift stores are full of copies of Invasion for some reason. And again, thanks to Portland 182 for sending me this one. And again, it's that 1960s Saturday afternoon kind of movie, or creature feature kind of movie that people like me who were of a certain generation really appreciate. And also younger people are watching these movies now and appreciating them. Invasion, worth checking out if you haven't already. But like it a lot, worth getting. Edward Judd was always an interesting actor in his film roles, though apparently his character and his unfortunate addiction to liquid refreshments did impede his career, which is quite sad. That then moves us on to the second one of the movies. By the way, at the end of the video, I've got some questions and answers that I asked my Facebook friends to put up general movie questions for me, so I've got that towards the end of the video. Plus I've got something cool that I ordered and got delivered, which is very on brand for this channel. And if I ever get a set together for this channel, it's going to be part of the set for the channel video. So moving right along, 1964, The Earth Dies Screaming, directed by Terence Fisher. It's a low-budget film starring a couple of actors, Willard Parker and Virginia Field, who were a married couple who had careers in the 40s and 50s in Hollywood, and then their careers diminished as they got older and their limits were recognised by the people who are making movies. And so they go over to England and make this low-budget, small-scale alien invasion movie. The movie starts with a montage of people passing out, in fact dying, of a gas attack across the world, where aliens of unknown origin kill off most of the human race. There's a train crash, there's a car crashing into a wall, there's a few other bits and pieces of people falling down and dying, and you get a kind of grisly montage of dead people, one of whom is just laying in a gutter with water running past their face. And all credit to that actor for not wincing every time the camera was on him. And then you see Willard Parker's character, who is a retiring test pilot who was up in his plane while the gas invasion killed most of the people on the Earth. He's in a Land Rover travelling around trying to find other people. He finds a small village, goes into an electronic shop to get a radio to try to communicate with other people. And as things move on, more and more people are found to have survived this, and you get a small cluster of people. You get a young couple, the woman of whom is quite pregnant. You get Dennis Price and a woman he has kind of semi-kidnapped. Thorley Walters playing a guy called Ed, whose girlfriend Viv and he were in a hermetically sealed lab dallying with each other at a chemical company function overnight, so they didn't get gassed.
Vi? Vi, we've got company. I'm Ed. I'm Ed Otis.
Jeff Nolan.
This is Vi. Violet Cortland.
Oh, I am pleased to see you. Eddie and I didn't know what to do.
Basically, you get a small group of people who hide in the local pub because why wouldn't you? And are trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to find out whether anyone survived. They're listening to the radio. They're trying to get each other's stories so they know what exactly has happened. And then some figures in spacesuits start walking through the village. And these aliens are totally oblivious to human beings. They get shot by a couple of rifles and nothing at all happens. But when Vi, the girlfriend of the Thorley Walters character, goes up and approaches them thinking there's some kind of authority wearing gas masks, they touch her and she dies instantly, only to be resurrected soon afterwards as a goofy-eyed zombie. Now, the young guy who turns up is kind of annoying. He's played by an actor called David Spencer, who later went on to do a bit of documentary work and do some writing as well. But his acting in this is weird. And here's one of the weird things I find about The Earth Dies Screaming, apart from the goofiness of the aliens. It's one of those English movies where everybody, regardless of their class, speaks with received pronunciation. They've all got that posh, stagey accent.
Now look, we've got to get cracking. I'm taking her to her mother's.
Where's that?
Liverpool.
Where'd you come from yesterday?
London.
I don't think you'll find it any different.
You think there's something out there?
We know there's something out there.
The girlfriend who was pregnant, played by Anna Polk, we told that she was from Liverpool and her parents are in Liverpool, speaks with perfect received pronunciation rather than a Liverpudlian accent, which is kind of weird. And the character of Mel, played by David Spencer, even though he's a poor guy, and they are having real troubles. They're married, but they're very, very poor, and they're trying to get to Liverpool to be with his wife's family because they can't afford to live in London. Even he speaks with received pronunciation rather than a working class accent of any sort, and it's a really mannered way of doing things. And of course it's based on English stage tradition, but looking at it now you think this would have been just that little bit better if people had had different accents rather than everybody speaking with exactly the same accent. Put me off a bit. Now, Willard Parker, the protagonist of the movie, interesting actor, not a good one. He was 52 at the time, but he looked like 15, 20 years older, which is something that people who smoke get. Their skin wrinkles up quite badly as they get older. And all through the movie he's chain smoking. It's a really weird thing that I noticed. Few of the other characters are doing much smoking in this movie. Jeff Nelson, which is crazily generic. He's smoking all the time. He's chain smoking almost. So every time they cut to a scene with him in it, he's either lighting up a fag or he's got one in his mouth. Now, Virginia Field does a little bit better. She's a more nuanced actor than her husband was. Your main hero, the character played by Willard Parker, and Virginia Field are kind of prosaic kind of characters. And it's left to the experienced character actors, particularly Dennis Price and Thorley Walters, to give us some stuff. Thorley Walters' guy is drunk, and he's not handling the apocalypse very well. But he does have some nice character beats, and he's a relatable and kind of sympathetic character as well. And Dennis Price's arsehole is great. Dennis Price, he really nailed that kind of a role in his career, and he does it incredibly smoothly. And also Van der Gotzel playing Vi, the woman who touches the alien and gets turned into a zombie. She has some good bits as well. She's quite an interesting actress as well. And these English trained stage actors do really well at filling out the world of the movie and filling out the characters. I like what's done by the experienced actors in this movie who aren't American. the other good thing is that it was filmed in one village called Shear in Surrey, Shere. And you can go on Google Maps and see the locations where The Earth Dies Screaming was filmed. And they're not that different. Yeah, the shops are selling different stuff, but the village and the pub are all still there. And that's kind of fun to do with these kind of movies which have just pretty much one location. They also have a civil defence building that they go to where they get some guns and they get a few other resources. So they're pretty much all you get in this movie as far as sets are concerned. And the creepiness of the aliens, who are a little like the Cybermen in Doctor Who in some ways. It works nicely because you're not expecting much of a movie this kind of small. And leaving aside the protagonist, it's the secondary characters you concentrate on. The dialogue's pretty good. Not perfect, but I think that it's delivered well by most of the actors. And that idea of a kind of cozy catastrophe, where people, even when there's an apocalypse, can go to the pub and drink hard liquor after licensing hours and make some food in the kitchen and that kind of stuff. Cozy catastrophes were a big thing in England in the 1950s and 1960s. John Wyndham's books were often seen to be cozy catastrophes. The Earth Dies Screaming works at that level. It's definitely a B picture. It's definitely one that was meant to be in a double feature because it's not particularly long. And it's the kind of movie that makes me think that more people should be doing these small-scale science fiction films that don't rely on special effects. There's maybe one or two effect shots in the whole movie where Vi touches the alien and there's a glow around her head. But for the most part, it's all in camera. And Terence Fisher's the kind of a director who does this well. And there's some nice depth of field shots in this movie as well. I like the way Terence Fisher filmed, particularly the outdoor scenes. There is some artistry and care taken with this one. Then we hop back one more year to 1963 and a little movie called Unearthly Stranger with John Neville, Gabriella Lucudi and Philip Stone. Again, small scale movie. Filmed partly on locations around London, particularly at the start where we get a bit of a frame story. With John Neville's character, who's a scientist, running frantically through the nighttime streets of London, particularly around the Thames Embankment, with something chasing him that's generating a weird noise. And he exhausts himself running back to his headquarters at the Royal Institute for Space Research, where he is researching a large-scale project to be able to travel to other planets by the power of thought. And the idea is that when you get there, your body will manifest in a way that can survive the environment of this other planet. And the head scientist of the team there, played by Warren Mitchell in a little two-scene character, where he's playing a kind of Scottish scientist and does quite a good Scottish accent. He suddenly hears this noise, and basically his brain turns to mush inside his skull. I'll read you the blurb off the back. Now, John Neville, you might remember from playing many years later Baron Munchausen in The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, the Terry Gilliam movie. But John Neville, as a scientist, engaged in an experimental project like no other. Gabriella Lucudi is his beautiful but otherworldly wife, Julie, who becomes the subject of great interest for his government superiors. An intelligence officer, played by Patrick Newell, is doing a bit of vetting on John Neville's character's new wife, Julie, and finds out that there's no record of her, and his name's Mark Davidson, and he finds out that he starts noticing things about his wife, because they kind of got married in a fever hotter than a pepper sprout, and he starts noticing that his wife never blinks. And he goes to, comes in late from the office. She's already in bed, and she sleeps with her eyes open. So he notices those things. And his friend, John, played by Philip Stone, who is working with him on the project, is an administrator there, comes over to the house for dinner and notices unexpectedly that she takes a very hot casserole dish out of the oven with bare hands. And they start getting the idea that there's something strange about Julie. And they format the hypothesis that they're trying to project themselves by the power of thought to another world and manifesting in a body suitable for that world. Another world is already doing that to our Earth, and that upsets them quite a bit. Meanwhile, Patrick Newell's intelligence officer tells them that other scientists in America and in Russia have died in exactly the same manner as Warren Mitchell's character, Professor Monroe, and that everybody is a little bit concerned about this. Now, the movie was directed by a guy called John Krish, and of the three, I think this one's directed even better than Terence Fisher's The Earth Dies Screaming, because it builds up its paranoia with a little bit of sound design on the creepy noises, but a lot of really good direction. At the start, when Mark runs into his office late at night, sweaty and terrified, he starts recording his story into a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And while he's narrating that, he's looking around, but he's also looking directly at the camera to kind of engage the audience. And John Neville's stagecraft really shows here, because he does a really good job of not breaking the fourth wall, but in some way engaging with it. And Gabriella Lacuti is kind of okay as Julie the wife. She doesn't have a lot of gravitas. There's another woman who works in the office, played by Jean Marsh, who does a much better job at giving us a decent female character than Julie, who's kind of basically housewife who is an alien. I think there needed to be a little bit more in her role than there was, whether it's the writing or whether it's her skill level at the time she made the movie or not, I don't know, but there's something not quite there. Though there are some scenes with Julie that are very effective. She walks past a schoolyard full of children, and the children look at her and then back off away from her and run into the buildings, because they know there's something not right about this woman. And after she sees the children fleeing from her in a very freaky way, and it is done very freakily, the kids walk backwards rather than turning and running, because they don't want to turn their back to whatever this woman is. She cries, and the tears leave streaks like acid down her cheeks. But by the time her husband gets home, that's gone. So the movie does a lot with a little. It thinks through its concept and has ways of showing us that Julie is an alien, that are subtly done and are well thought out and don't require a lot of extra effort. And I appreciate that. I like movies that are smart about how they show rather than tell. If Umbrella or Imprint are watching, you could do worse than Unearthly Stranger for a release. There's a theatrical trailer and a few other little bits on this one, but not too much. Like Invasion, this was released by Network in England, and they do a bare bones job of it, but the print they've got is really good, and the story the movie tells is great, and it has a killer ending. The ending is... I could talk a lot about the nature of the aliens as they manifest on the Earth, but I'm not going to. Just think about the people who turn out to be aliens in this movie, and you'll find an interesting little subtext there, which is probably known by the people making the film, but doesn't leap out and jab you in the eyes. It's subtle until that last moment where it ends on a grace note of extreme creepiness, which reminded me a little bit of some of the scenes in Herc Harvey's Carnival of Souls. Unearthly Stranger, you need to have this in your collection. I believe it is on some streaming services. It may even be on Tubi, though don't hold me to that. But these three movies, Unearthly Stranger, Invasion, and The Earth Dies Screaming. By the way, the title of The Earth Dies Screaming was a joke among the production crew, which stuck. But yeah, the 1960s English alien invasion films, which show you a tiny bit of a very much larger picture. And I appreciate that. By the way, I love that cover art on this one. That 1960s style science fiction cover art really works for me. Cozy catastrophes, 1960s black and white, low budget British alien invasion movies. I've got some questions that I asked my Facebook friends, most of whom are my personal friends as well, just as a bit of a joke to see what kind of a video I could generate with it. First off, my friend Chris Bowbridge over in Perth says, have you ever watched Monster Trucks and what did you think of it? Monster Trucks is a horror movie for kids where an alien hides in a pickup truck and becomes part of the engine of it. Haven't seen it yet, Chris? I probably will now, because you go on about Monster Trucks a lot, because I think your kids like watching it. But I will watch Monster Trucks, and I will let you know what I think of it. And Derek Francis, another good friend of mine, says, What is your favorite ultimate comfort film? Multiple answers permitted by request explanations. Okay. Comfort films. Leaving aside Red Tube, and that's a joke for people who know what Red Tube is. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Young Girls of Rochefort, both of which are Jacques Demy movies. The Young Girls of Rochefort is one of the most joyous films I know. It's got one of the last dancing movies Gene Kelly was in, and it's much better than Xanadu. Love Jacques Demy movies. Science fiction movies, The Core, the 2004 movie with Aaron Eckhart and Stanley Tucci and Delroy Lindo. Fantastic cast. Really dumb, big scale science fiction movie that I like. Comfort films, Banning from 1967. A golfing movie starring Robert Wagner and Jill St. John and Gene Hackman in an early role. I like it a lot. I just like the kind of suave style of it. Umbrella put it out a few years ago, but unfortunately they couldn't get a widescreen version of it, so they did a 3x2 release of it. But I like Banning, and I like that kind of mid-range Universal movies that were programmers for the 1960s, and Banning is definitely one of those. What else have I got? Ultimate kids film, comfort film for me, 1940 Thief of Baghdad, the one that Michael Powell worked on with John Justin and Sabu and June Dupree and Conrad Veidt playing the original Jafar, the evil wizard. It's a fantastic film. It was made on both sides of the Atlantic during the war because they had to move production from England to America because they didn't want to get bombed by the Germans. Thief of Baghdad, ultimate children's adventure film. Fantastic film. It's out on Blu-ray everywhere, and it's worth keeping in your collection. So thanks for that, Derek. Next one from my little sister, Linda. Little sister. Question is, your thoughts on Good Will Hunting? Didn't like it. I mean, it's got Affleck and it's got Matt Damon and it's got Robin Williams, yeah. But I think it's kind of self-conscious in some ways. Not my favourite film at all. A little too blokey for my taste. But I know a lot of people appreciate it. I don't think it's a bad movie. I just think it's not for me. Let's see. And Middle-Aged Geek Girl says, what's your favourite movie monster? There's a lot of them. If we're going very broadly on the term monster, Charles Laughton in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the 1939 version. I think Laughton did a fantastic job of playing a sympathetic person who is perceived by the people around him to be a monster. Really good film, and it's got an early Edmund O'Brien in a romantic leading role as well. I like that one a lot. He's probably the one that first came to mind when I saw that question. Other favourite movie monsters? I kind of like the Cthulhu in The Relic, the genetically altered monster that terrorizes the Natural History Museum in Chicago. The Relic is a lot of fun as a monster movie as well. Let's see, what other ones? Got to go with Gojira as well. The original Gojira is a force of nature, and I think that it owes nothing to anybody. Even though there were giant monster movies before the original Gojira, I think that that's the one that really cemented in that genre of monster movies and did a fantastic job of it with limited resources. And Linda's husband, Gavin, my brother-in-law, says, The Man with the Golden Arm isn't one of Sinatra's best. Yeah, I mean, there's a few good Sinatra ones. There's From Here to Eternity is really good. There's The Man with the Golden Arm. Really good in Some Came Running as well with Dean Martin. But yeah, Man with the Golden Arm is fantastic because, apart from anything else, you got Darren McGavin playing his pusher. And it's an early Darren McGavin role that shows how fine an actor he was as well. But it's good that Sinatra went to that place and played that kind of character and proved to everybody after they had written him off as a crooner in the early 1950s that not only was he a fine singer, but he could also act the hell out of any role he cared about. If he didn't care, he was cashing a check a lot of the time. But in movies like that, he did fantastically well. Okay, Dr. Zom gives me the last question. What's your favourite Irwin Allen movie? Thanks a lot, mate. Probably The Swarm, because it's dumb as hell, but entertaining at the same time, about the bee swarms, where you get a whole bunch of really old actors doing all sorts of interesting bits with their roles, and you get a whole bunch of young actors, including Michael Caine, coming in and cashing checks for this weird movie about killer bees swarming over California and crashing trains and doing all sorts of other shit like that. It's a mad movie, and it's one of those movies that isn't good but is watchable. So that's my answers. That brings me to the last bit, which is the stuff that I got. Now, I'm wearing this hat for a reason, because you can get Vegemite jars printed with whatever you like on the front of them. So I got these. Terry Talks Movies Vegemite. I couldn't get all of the words on one jar, so I had to go with the second one. But these weren't too expensive, and these are hefty little things too. They're chunky. 380 grams of Vegemite in each one. And yes, we will eat them, and yes, we will use them up in this house. But I'm going to keep the jars after we do, as props for a studio if I ever get one. But I just thought that was a cute thing to do. Not terribly expensive, but yummy as hell. And if you're not an Australian, you don't know how to use Vegemite, use it lightly. It's like Carolina Reaper hot sauce or wasabi. You don't go slathering it on. You do it lightly. Vegemite's also really good in stews. You can make good gravies with it. It's got that umami tsunami that you need in certain kinds of savoury foods. And I just love these because I got them made for me. So that's it for this time around. We've got 3 monster movies. We've got questions and answers. We've got extra Vegemite in this video. So if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. Let me know which of the movies you liked. And ask me some questions, and I'll do another one of these answers as well. So that's your job for this time around. You can also support the channel by donating as little as $1 American per month at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies. The other thing too is watch the ads before the video, because they help the channel. And the other thing is that at the end of the video there is always a link to a playlist and a link to another video you might like after this one. So stick around and click those links and just go down the rabbit hole of watching what I produce. So thanks a lot for watching. Until next time, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some very small budget science fiction invasion movies from the 1960s, and I'll catch you next time.